Published 5:46 Eastern Daylight Saving Time, the 21st of September 2018. Updated 8:19 Eastern Daylight Saving Time, the 21st of September 2018. Theresa May was hoping that the Salzburg summit could be the moment that her political fortunes changed. Downing Street went into the gathering with the expectation that EU leaders would, if not endorse, at least stop short of killing her Chequers plan. That would have allowed her to go into a potentially explosive Conservative Party conference at the end of this month with a modicum of wind in her sails. But in the event, her compromise plan, pushed through at home at the cost of ministerial resignations and a simmering Tory mutiny, was brutally knifed by her counterparts. The meltdown has raised fresh doubts about whether Mrs May can survive much longer in number 10, and brought the prospect of the UK crashing out of the bloc a step closer. It appears tensions were heightened by a series of missteps by the PM and her aides as the drama unfolded. A clearly shaken Theresa May insisted she was sticking to her Chequers plan at a press conference in Salzburg after the vicious attacks from EU leaders. 1. Tough talk before the summit. Ms May set the tone on the eve of the Salzburg meeting by writing an article in Die Welt. It warned the bloc against making unacceptable demands on the Irish border, repeating her mantra that no UK PM could ever accept Northern Ireland being under a foreign customs jurisdiction. The combative piece is said to have infuriated leaders by effectively rejecting Michel Barnier's revised proposals on the border issue before they have even been published. Mr Barnier has said he is looking to improve his plan, and suggested that technology could minimize checks. But he is still clear that the border should be between mainland Britain and Northern Ireland. 2. After dinner speech fell flat, EU leaders have been refusing to discuss Brexit directly with Mrs May all along, insisting that Mr Barnier is carrying out the negotiations for them. There had been hopes that the summit would be the first occasion when there would be exchanges on the issue at national leader level. However, those hopes were dashed when EU Council President Donald Tusk declared that Mrs May would only get to deliver a 10-minute speech at the end of dinner. By that time the leaders had already been through a scratchy 4-hour debate on the migration crisis, a bigger concern than Brexit for many of them. And Mrs May caused frustration among her weary audience by effectively reading out the Die Welt article. That is not the way to command a tired group of leaders who are all bit sick of each other, one diplomat told The Times. Over dinner on Wednesday night, gathered EU leaders were told that Britain would be prepared to walk away from the negotiating table if a deal was not struck quickly. EU Council President Donald Tusk had restricted Mrs May to delivering a 10-minute speech after dinner, rather than debating directly with leaders. 3. Suspicions about plans to slash red tape. The situation was not helped by the emergence of a report that Trade Secretary Liam Fox was planning to slash food standards after Brexit to give the UK a competitive advantage and secure a US trade deal. Although furiously denied by Dr. Fox, the claim seems to have gained traction with delegations from EU countries and encouraged them to take a tough line. One of the EU's overriding fears is that the UK cutting red tape and lowering taxes could provide an advantage for businesses after we leave. The situation was not helped by the emergence of a report that Trade Secretary Liam Fox was planning to slash food standards after Brexit to give the UK a competitive advantage and secure a US trade deal. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, was among those urging a less accommodating approach that preserved the strict rules of the single market for wrong kind of support. Britain's allies, such as the Netherlands, Sweden, Denmark and Poland, had been pushing for serious consideration of the Chequers blueprint. France and Germany, meanwhile, had been urging a less accommodating approach that preserved the strict rules of the single market. But the advocates for a deeper relationship seem to have been muted somewhat by the strident intervention of Hungarian Premier Viktor Orban. He condemned the determination of some EU leaders to punish the UK for choosing to leave. However, Mr. Orban is currently viewed as a pariah by other leaders after pushing the country to the political right. Advocates for a deeper relationship with the UK seem to have been muted somewhat by the strident intervention of Hungarian Premier Viktor Orban, pictured 5. Delays Irish border proposals. The EU had been expecting Britain to come forward with its own plans for the Irish border backstop, the big sticking point in sealing the divorce package. But having flatly rejected the EU's thinking, Mrs May is then said to have delivered a difficult message in a meeting with Irish PM Leo Varadkar yesterday morning. She apparently admitted that the UK's rival backstop blueprint would not be ready for the next EU summit in October. The news caused anger as there had been lingering hopes that summit would see the withdrawal agreement to all intents and purposes settled. That is said to have tipped the scales against Mrs May, raising questions about whether the UK was serious about negotiations. After discussing the situation in private for 2 hours, the hardline French and German approach won out and the brutal attack on Chequers was launched. Theresa May held talks with Irish PM Leo Varadkar, pictured, before the summit entered its second day in Salzburg this morning. Mr Macron made an extraordinary intervention into domestic British politics as he delivered a stinging verdict on Chequers. By the time the summit ended in Salzburg, Mrs May, pictured lining up for the family photograph, was cutting an isolated figure.